Test. Test 1, 2.
Recording in progress.
Freshman, sophomore, junior, senior.
And I thought she was farther along. Even with it, I knew she had the gap.
Maybe it's junior, but I think, if I remember correctly, I think she was on her native year during.
Test 1, 2.
Yes, that's right. That's
Yeah.
right. When COVID hit, that's right. You're right.
Yeah. And so 2021 would have been her freshman year. 21-22 would have been sophomore. Oh, so this is the start of her junior year.
Oh, okay.
You're right.
Are those up there like the scrolls that don't get used anymore?
So those scrolls are scrolls from another part of the Hebrew biblical canon. So the Hebrew Bible is the Tanakh, right? You've got Torah, the 5 books, and then you've got all the prophets, which is where your Haftarah comes from. And then you've got all the other writing, like the book of Psalms. You're like, wait, that is Bible, but that's not the Torah, right? So all those other books, they also used to be written on scrolls, and people still have them on scrolls. We don't read them from scrolls anymore. Now that we print them in books, we don't read them from scrolls. Very few communities have the tradition of reading them from scrolls anymore, but we have the scrolls, so we're not going to throw them away, so we display them.
They're actually, Ada
Yeah, probably up in that room that we have. We have like
Because we used to
an
have 4
archival
on
room.
each side.
Yeah. We may even have more than 8 of them. We have a lot. We have so many scrolls. There really should be another
The
inventory.
last time I saw one used was when one of Mark Bernstein's kids was.
Yeah, you
she
told
read
me about that.
Haftarah from scroll.
That's so cool. Some people like the challenge. Not me, but some people. It's one of my favorite parts of Haftarah is that you have the,
Right.
yeah.
You feel like you're cheating.
Yeah, a little bit. You want to know something really neat? I bet your dad already knows, or grandfather already knows this, but like one of my favorite pieces of halakha is that in Masechet Megillah, in the Mishnah on Megillah, we learn that the Megillah of Esther can be kosher when it's written with dots. Like you can write a kosher Megillah scroll for Esther with nikud. There's nothing non-kosher about it. People feel like it's not kosher, so they don't do it. But I have always, this is actually a lifelong dream of mine, is to commission a scroll with the dots in it. I have a friend who's a soferet, so it's like, it's totally my dream. I'd have to save up a lot of money to do it. But why not, right? Why not, like, because Purim is one of the most fun nights of the year. And like, why make that the speed bump to people getting a chance to read on Purim? So,
I saw something interesting when we were in Israel, our first trip in '91. We were in Sfat and we went to the Karla Shul.
yeah.
And they have, on the reading table, they have a Torah in the case,
Mm-hmm.
open, just leaving it open. And the way they were able to do that, I just realized that this is why they were able to. They had it on display, is because it had all the vowels.
Whoa.
Now, it may not, I don't even know if it was on a cloth or not.
Huh. Okay, so maybe it was just like a paper
But
situation.
whatever it was,
That's so neat.
it had the vowels. And I thought,
That's a really neat thing. Yeah.
they do that. Now I understand it. It's so that they
Right,
can
so you
leave
could
it out
display.
open.
Yeah. Wow, that's so neat. Yeah, I love that. One of my favorite practices I've noticed, actually, this should maybe go in the ritual book that I'm putting together. I'm working on a new book, and it's on the concept of ritual. A lot of people will take scrolls that have been made not kosher because they've been destroyed, either in a fire, the Shoah, something like that, and they'll find the selection of their own parsha or their kids' or grandkids' parsha, and then they'll have it framed and put up on a wall, and then a little note about it, which is a lovely idea. And I think it's a really neat ritual because, you know, otherwise it has to just get buried or put in a geniza, and so then they'll select it and frame it. That's a nice way to display it too, is because we'd have to bury it anyway, so you can put it up. Yeah.
When we were in Sfat, another trip, we bought a couple of framed pictures,
Yeah.
that they do there, a lot of the artists, where they use Hebrew characters,
Yes.
tiny
Micrography.
So
Yeah.
I enjoyed reading Song of Songs so much. That time I was doing it regularly.
Yeah.
And by regular I mean once a year. And so I bought the Song of Songs. The entire Song of Songs is in this.
In one picture. My friend, Ray Antonoff Portnoy, I think is her full name. She's an acquaintance, but a friend in the neighborhood. She's the director of the Torah school at Beiteinu Chodeshim down the street.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So she does this. She does the micrography, and she's continued this art, and she's done some really neat ones. Lately, I saw one on I don't know how much of Parshat Noach she got in there, but it's the full arc with Noach in there. So I saw a really gorgeous one of that, and yeah, she did a Pride one, like with really like neat verses on Pride. So she did one in honor of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, with verses on justice, all the verses on tzedek in the Tanakh. So
This Song of Songs is 2 stems with flowers on them.
yeah.
And if you look at it just right, you see 2 faces there about to kiss.
So beautiful.
It takes a while to
Okay,
see it.
that's good.
Now it's better. Okay, I'm gonna put them in papers.
And then we removed the drywall as well.
I know, it's great. I hope they allow this tree to grow up a little more. I know, right? It would be nice. Great. Great. And it won't be any sun anyway.
And they, looks like they cleaned the skylight up there.
They did, Giovanni told me yesterday morning he was going up there.
Oh, good, I'm glad.
Yeah. Take a hose up there and do a tree, walk on it.
Right, glass. You're walking, you fall right through it. And so when we were to see, if I were to see that, I'd say, thanks for dropping in.
Use the one from the first tour.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, the finger broke off, so it was crappy about it.
No, it's just nice. It's bent.
Oh, it's bent, okay. Is that why you don't like it?
No, I just don't.
Oh, okay. I was there for those two, or the new ones.
Well, it's here because the chain is broken.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think that they were rolled, but I don't know. Like, okay, so should I go out there and make sure they're rolled? Because the two correct tours are out there, but I don't know that the Rosh Kodesh one is rolled to Rosh Kodesh. So should I go out and do it? Is that what I agreed to? Ours are.
That's what I would assume, but I
Yeah,
do,
go out there and check.
I have no idea.
I have time. So
Okay.
I'll go do that.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom, Khodesh Tov.
So will you lead us in Torah service today? It's Beiteinu. It's very low key. There's like no stakes. I'll be up there with you if you want to.
There's no stakes even if it's not Beiteinu.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, there's like nothing happening today. Will you join me? The whole thing that you did for me on Thursday, where it's like, ain't come out with that. You know the whole thing start to finish. I heard you on it.
Candace Harney can also stand with you.
Yeah, I could be there the whole time.
She can do it with you.
You know it start to finish because I've heard you on it. You sound awesome on it, and that way, like the time that you do it on your birthday, it won't be the first time. So you're like sitting at the Exactly. You don't have to hold the tour or anything. I'll like hold the tour at the Shema moment and everything. You can just like be like helper for the day with it.
It's just that at the beginning, and
Exactly.
then you don't have to do the second part.
Yeah. Yeah? Okay. You have like an hour until that happens, so you're good. Like, no nerves. If it gets you nervous about it, forget it, because it's not meant to make you nervous. It's meant to like be a chance for you to practice going through it with like zero pressure. Like, really, there's no one's judging. It's just like, oh, no, I see it.
Yeah, that's true. It was there because of the riots during the summer when people were throwing things at the building. Yeah.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Mike, I'm sorry that I haven't been at Minion recently. The page number for what you're gonna be doing? You want the page number for what you're gonna be doing? Oh, yeah, I just thought that's what you were looking at. Yeah. Oh, interesting. We don't do Psalm 27 until tomorrow.
Right.
I thought we did it tonight, but we don't.
Oh.
Do it tomorrow.
We're not gonna do it tomorrow, we're gonna start tomorrow morning. Got it.
Yeah, now we know. All right, we are going to begin. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. For now, I will remain unmasked, though as the room fills up, you will see me with a mask on, just so that I can get on a plane to Israel later this week. But we'll begin on page 103, and if you're able to do so, please rise. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan l'sechvi v'ina li'avchi min yom u'vein laila. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asani betzamo. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asani bat chorin. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asani Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, pokeach ivrim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, malbish arumim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, matir asurim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, zokef kefufim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, rokah haaretz al hamayim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamechim mitzadei gaver. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asa li kol tzarki. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, ozer Yisrael bigvura. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, oter Yisrael betifara. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hanoten layayev koach. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamavir she'ena meinai, u'tnuma me'af apai, v'yirzo mefanecha l'nelim. U'teneinu hayom v'chol yom, lechenu chesed rachamim beinecha v'nei koranim v'tigmalenu chasadim tovim. Baruch atah Adonai, gomel chasadim tovim l'emo Yisrael. You may be seated. Ashrenu atav chakenu, manim koralenu, mayafa yerushatenu, asher shenachnu mashkim arivim, erev avoker, v'mim pamayim b'chol yom. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai echad. Kadesh Shimcha Makdishei Shemecha, V'kadesh Shimcha Be'olamecha, V'shutcha Tarim V'tag B'yakarnenu, Baruch atah Adonai, V'kadesh Shimcha Barabim. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu Melech haolam, asher Yisrael, Asok B'divrei Torah. Yehirat mifanecha, Adonai Eloheinu Elokei Avotenu, shetiten chalkenu b'toratecha, v'niyeh mitamidav shel Aaron Kohen, ohev shalom v'rotev shalom, ohev et habriyot u'mekaran laTorah. We'll turn now to the Psalm for Rosh Chodesh, which is on page 114. Oh, give me 1 second. this isn't my stender. Okay. I'll get the other page numbers in just a moment, but Psalm 104 is on page 114, or in the Sim Shalom 78, or page 34. Barchi nafshi et Adonai Adonai. Barchi nafshi et Adonai, hallelujah. Page 120. Mizmor shir, Chanukat habayit leDavid. Eilecha Adonai ekra, ve'el Adonai etchanan. Eilecha Adonai ekra, ve'el Adonai etchanan. Shema Adonai,
Shema Adonai v'choneini v'choneini Adonai ozer li.
Shema Adonai,
Shema Adonai v'choneini Adonai ozer li.
Leheman yizamecha chava v'lo yidam, Adonai Elohai le'lamodecha. Mourner's Kodesh, page 121, page 82, or page 52. Yit gadal ve'yit kadash shemei rabba,
Amen.
be'alma divra kirutei ve'amlich malchutei, bechayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael, ba'agala u'bizman kari ve'imru amen.
Amen.
Yehi
Yehi Shemei Rabba mevarach le'olam lo'amei amaya.
Yit barach ve'yish dabach ve'yit pa'ar ve'yit romam ve'yit naseh ve'yit hadar ve'yit aleh ve'yit halal shemei dekudesha b'richu
B'richu.
le'ela min kol birchata ve'shirata tush bechata ve'nechemata da'amiran be'elma ve'imru amen. Yehi shalama rabba min shemaya ve'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'ramav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru amen. As we begin Psukei de Zimra, we'll ask you to rise on page 122, page 83, or page 54. Baruch shemar v'haya olam, Baruch hu.
Baruch hu Sefer Baruch hu Mefer Sefer Baruch hu.
Yachid chelami, melech meshubach v'adei ad shemo gadol, Baruch atah Adonai, melech mehulal bat yishpachot. You may be seated. Turn to page 125, 85, or 58. Vehu rachum yechaper avam v'lo yashchiv v'lo yashiv avam v'lo yigach u'mortah. Adonai Tzevaot imanu, miskav lanu, Elohei Yaakov Sela. Adonai Tzevaot, Ashrei Adam boteach bach,
Adonai Yoshia, Hamelech Yaneinu V'Yom Koreinu, Yaneinu Nai 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 Nai, Yanai Nai 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 Yanai, Yanai Nai 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 Nai, Yanai Nai 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 Nai.
Hoshia Tamecha
Hoshia Tamecha V'Rech.
ואני בחסדך בטחתי, יגל ליבי בישועתך, אשיר אל אדוני, כי גמל עלי, למצח מזבח לדוד ישוע. יהיו לרצוני מריפי, והגיון ליבי לפניך, אדוני צורי וגואלי, לדוד בשעתו תמול לפני מלך פרגשי וילך אחריך. חפץ חיים, אוהב ימים לראות טוב, נצור לשונך מהירה, ושפתיך מדבר לי. Shalom, Oh, Adonai Nevesh Avada, Velo Yashmu Kol HaChosim Bo. If you're able to do so, please rise. Page 132, page 92, or page 72. Hodu l'Adonai ki tov, ki le'olam chasto. Shebeshifleinu zachar lanu ki le'olam chasto vayifrekeinu mitzareh. For Shabbat can be found on page 134. You may be seated. Mizmor Shir Le'Yom HaShabbat. Odianu vum beseva, deshenim v'rananim yiyu, le'agi ki Asher Adonai, tzuri velo avlatavo, Adonai malach yelavesh lavesh Adonai yosif tazat. Edo techanenu meod, leveit chanav Kodesh, Adonai leorech yamim, yichav Adonai l'olam yismach Adonai b'masav yishem Adonai. והוא רחום יכפר עוון ולא ישחית, והרבה להשיבה פה ולא ירקול חמתו. אדוני הושיע המלך יעננו, ויום קוראנו, אשר יושבי ביתך, עוד יהללוך סלע. Tehillat Adonai ידבר פיו, ויברך כל בשר שם קודשו לעולם ועד, ואנחנו נברכיה, מעתה ועד עולם, הללויה, הללויה, הלי נפשי את אדוני, Adonai shomer et gerim, yatom le'almanai udeid, v'derech reshaim ye'aveit. Yimloch Adonai le'olam, Elohai Zion le'dor v'dor. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Psalm 150 can be found on page 141, page 100, or page 88. Hallelujah, 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 el bekodsho, hallelujah, v'irkiya uzo, hallelujah, v'gorotav, hallelujah, hallelujah, b'teik hashofar, hallelujah, b'nevel v'chidor, hallelujah, b'tov u'machol, hallelujah, b'mini ve'ugav, hallelujah, v'tzitzilei shama, hallelujah, v'tzitzilei truma, kol hashama tehallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah, kol hashama tehallelujah, hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Baruch Adonai Amen v'amen. Baruch Adonai Vaymalech v'ado kol haaretz. Amen v'amen. If you're able to do so, please rise. Top of page 142. Atahu Adonai Elohim, Asher B'chata Avraham, V'tzitum Me'or Kastim, V'samta Shamo Avraham, U'matzatet Levavo, Ne'eman Lefanecha, V'hayam V'kata Lifnehem, V'yavru V'tochayam Be'yabasha, V'yodfehem Ishtach L'mitzolot, K'uavim Emayim Azim, V'yosher Adonai V'yom Vayaminu Badonai Uv Moshe Avdo. Adonai Yimloch Le'olam Va'ed Ki l'Adonai Hamloch HaMoshe B'Elohim V'alu Mashim B'Haratzin L'Shpadet Harisav V'hayta l'Adonai Hamlocha V'haya Adonai L'Melech HaKol Haaretz V'yom Hahu Yeh Adonai Echad U'Shemo Echad. You may be seated, page 145, or for those at home, page 104 or page 334. Tevarech et Shimcha Adonai Eloheinu Nishmat Kol Chai Tevarech et Shimcha Adonai Eloheinu Nehalelcha shavechacha nefarecha nevarecha shem koshecha kamila David Barchi nafshi et Adonai v'chok ravai et shem kodsho ha'el betatzumotu zecha hagadol bichvod shemecha hagibor lanetzach v'nora v'noratecha hamelech hayoshev al kisei ram v'nisa.
Middle of 147 or 105 or 336. Shekhinah Marom v'kadosh Shemo.
Shekhinah Marom v'kadosh Shemo.
V'katiranu tzadikim banunai le'sharim navar tehillah. Mevi sharim titala. U'divrei tzadikim titbarach. U'vilshon chasidim titromham. U'vkerev kadoshim titkadash. U'makalot rivevot amechavet Yisrael. Bahar Shimcha malkeinu v'chol davador. Shekein chovat kol yitzarim lefanech Adonai Eloheinu v'Elokei Avotenu. Le'odot lehalel v'shabech l'fayir v'ramem lehader. Le'varech le'alehu kalis. Al kol divrei shirot v'tish b'chot. David ben Yishai. Avtecha v'shichecha.
Please rise.
Yishabach Shimcha La'id Malkei Ve'Hamelech Berachut ve'hodahut me'atav v'olam baruch atah Adonai El melech gadol b'tishbachot el ha'otot Adonai niflaot Habocher b'shirei zimra melech el Amen. Vikata Shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Yom Divrach Yerushalayim Lich Malchutei. V'chai Yichonu Yomechonu Chayidu Chol Beit Yisrael. V'galav Yizman Karev Imru Amen. Yishmei Rabbah Livrach. Yallahu Le'amaya. Yit Parach V'yishabach V'yit Par V'yitramam V'yitnasei. V'yitadar V'yitalei V'yitalhal. Shemei Dekut Shabirich. V'yehipa Min Kol Birchata V'shirata. Tishbechata V'nechamata. Tamiram B'yama. V'imru Amen. Just a moment, I'll lead us in the Baruch Hu on page 149, and after the Baruch Hu, you can be seated. We do our best not to disrupt the prayers between the Baruch Hu and the Amidah with many announcements, but we'll gesture for you to rise at the bottom of page 158 in the Lev Shalem, and also on pages 114 and 352 for the beginning of the Amidah. Don't forget in the Amidah, which we'll be doing in a Hechi Kedusha, meaning we begin together and then go our separate ways, that that today is Rosh Chodesh. That's it. We're on page 149, on page 107 and 340. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Adonai HaKol Yeducha V'Kol Yishmerucha. Ke'erkecha Adonai Eloheinu Olam Hazavin Tzolatecha Malkeinu L'chayei Olam Haba Efes B'Techa Goleinu limot HaMashiach, v'injam elecha HaMashiachenu, v'tchiat HaMeitim. El Adonai kol ha'masim, Baruch u'mvarach lefi kol neshama, kolo v'tuvo, ma'alei olam, da'at yishvuna esov v'imoto. Hamnitkarei al chayot HaKodesh v'nedar v'chavod al hamerkava zechut u'mishor lifnei chiso chesed v'rachamim lifnei chevoto tovim le'orot shebara Eloheinu yitzaram v'dahat v'bina u'vaskel koach u'v'rana natan lahem li'yot Moshe li b'kerev tevel v'leizi v'kim roga nahizivam b'chol ha'olam
Smechim b'tzitam, v'sasim b'voham, O siviyeh maritzam konam, v'yer v'chavod, notenim lishmo, tzol avirin alizecher malchuto, karav hashemesh, v'yisrachor, rahavihin tzurat almana, shefa, notenim lo, kol tivamaro, tiferet ugedula, seraphim v'hofanim, v'chayot hakodesh, v'lasher shavat, mikol hamasim, v'yom hashvi t'lav yishavot kisef fujom. Yitbarach Moshiach al shevach masei yadecha, v'yom hayor she'asit hayifaru chatzela. Yitbarach sureinu al kein v'goleinu, borei kedoshim yishabach shem. Kulam ahuvim, kulam berurim, kulam giborim, v'kulam osim imah, v'yirad ritzon konam, v'kulam patachim epihem b'yishav Torah, v'shirav zimra, umvarechim u'shavechim, umvarim umvaritzim umvakdishim umamlichim, et shem ha'el melech hagadol, hagibor v'hanora kadoshu, v'kulam מקבלים עליהם, מלכות שמיים זה מזה, ונותנים רשות לזה, להקדיש ליוצר מנחת רוח, בשפה ברורה ובנימה קדושה, כולם כאחד עונים ואומרים וירא, קדוש קדוש קדוש, אדוני צבאות, מלוך הארץ כבודו. Fanim v'chayot HaKodesh b'rash gadol mitnasim l'umat serafim le'umatam mishabechim ve'omerim Baruch kevod Adonai mimekomo v'yeh Baruch limo titeinu lamelech elechai v'kayam z'mirot yomeiru v'tishbachot yashmihu Yehu the Badoba. Or Chadash Atzion Tayivanis Kechulan Me'ra Deoro Baruch Atah Adonai Yotzer HaMeorot Beiteinu Adonai Eloheinu Chemla Gidola V'Tera Chamalta Aleinu Avinu Malkeinu Ba'avur Avotenu Shabbat Chuvecha Avinu Malkeinu Vatilamdem Chukei Chaim Kein Techonenu Tamtenu Avinu HaParachaman Hamrachim Rachim Aleinu V'tein V'libeinu Lehavin Ulhaskil Lishmoa Lilmod Ulamed Lishmor V'lasot Ukayim V'tkol Divrei Talmud Torah Techa V'hava V'ha'erininu V'torah Techa V'dahavik Livinu V'mitzvotecha V'yachid Levavidu V'yahava U'yirai Shemecha V'lod Evosh V'olam Mahid V'lod Nevosh V'olam Mahid Ki L'shem Kodesh Hagadol v'hanorah v'hatachnu Nagila v'nismecha Yeshuatecha Vavinu l'shalom erva kamfot haaretz. L'tolichaynu komi t'lertzenu. Kiel polei Yeshua tatu banu v'acharta mikol am v'lashon. V'kerav tanu l'shimcha gadol sela be'emet liudot l'chal yachetcha b'yahava. Baruch atah Adonai abocher b'yamo Yisrael b'yahava. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Adonai Elohim Hemet v'yatzivnekum. L'dor v'ador kayam u'shmo kayam v'chizon achon malchuto v'emhunato lad kayamet. Emet shatahu Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avoteinu. Elkeinu melech Avoteinu go'aleinu go'el Yitzareinu tzor Yeshuateinu. Odeinu matzilinu me'olam shemecha. Ein Elohim zulatecha. Ezrat Avoteinu atahu me'olam. Begin Leilot Le'Yuber Chuvara, Moshe V'nei Yisrael V'chanu Shira, V'simcha Rabba V'meru Hulam, Mi Chamocha V'yelim Adonai, Mi Chamocha Nidar B'Kodesh, Nora Tehilot, Osei V'ele, Shira Chadasha, Shivichu Geulim, Leshimcha Sefatayah, Yachai Kulam, Odu, V'imlichu V'hameru, Adonai Lo, Le'olam Va'ed, Tzur Yisrael, Kumad Yisrael, Uftichinu Mecha, Yehuda Yisrael, Go Aleinu, Adonai Tzavahot Shemo, Kitosh Yisrael, Baruch Atah Adonai, Yisrael. Baruch Atah Adonai, Eloheinu, Elohei Avoteinu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el HaGadol, HaGibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Noel Chasadim Tovim, V'konei HaKol, V'zocher Chatzei Avot, V'levi Goel, Livnei V'nehem, L'man Shemo V'Ahava, Melech Ozer Ufokeinu, Moshiach U'Magen, Baruch Atah Adonai, Magen Avraham, Ufokei Tzara, Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai, V'chaim Eitim Atah, Rav Le'Hoshia, V'chalkel Chaim V'chesed, V'chaim Eitim V'rachamim Rabim, Somech Noteli V'rofei Kolim, U'matir Asirim, U'mkayim Emunato, L'shinei Afar, Mi'chamocha Bal Gevuros, U'nidom Eloch, V'lech Levi T'mechayim, U'matzliach Yeshua V'nimhat Talachayot Metim, Baruch Atah Adonai, V'chayei HaMetim.
Nekadesh Shemcha Malach Hashem, Shema Hashem Atov Hashem Arak HaKativenu V'checha Ze'azeh.
Nikadesh Shemcha Ba'olam Geshem, Shemakti Shemoto B'Shmeim Harom, Kakatuv Al Yad Nevi'echa, V'kara Sa'el Zev Yamar.
Kadosh, 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 Adonai
Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh,
Kadosh,
Adonai Tzevot, Melech Kol Haaretz, Kivodo, Azbeiko, Rash Gadol, Aidir Chazak, Mashlim Kol, Mitnasim, Lehumat Serafim, Lehumatam, Baruch Yomeru, Baruch Kevod Adonai, Nimekom Macha, Malkeinu Tovia, ותמלוך עלינו כי מחכים אנחנו לך. מתי תמלוך ותהיו מקרוב בימינו לעולם בעת תשכון. תתקדש ותקדש בתוך ירושלים יריחו. לדור ודור נצח נצחים. לעינינו תראינה מלכותך. כדבר אמור לשירי עוזך על ידי דוד משיח צדקך. ימלוך אדוני עולם אלוהי ציון לדור ודור הללויה. לדור ודור נגיד גודלך ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש. לשבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד. כי מלך גדול וקדוש אתה. ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש. ישמח משה מלך הקווים.
If you have not yet finished your Amidah, please continue at your own pace. Because today is Rosh Chodesh Elul, we are going to be doing Hallel next, which can be found on page 316, and for those at home on page 133 or page 380.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu likrat halel.
Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam asher kishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu likrat halel.
Hallelujah, hallelujah, Adonai, hallelujah, Shem Adonai. Miki v'li hafardam le'hashvatarim evyad le'hashivim nedivim netivei amoy moshivi akeret habayit heim havanim semecha. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Beit Yisrael, Mitzrayim, Beit Yaakov, Me'alo Adonai zicharanu yivarech, yivarech et Beit Yisrael, yivarech et Beit Aharon, yivarech yirei Adonai, haketanim hagedolim, Yosef Adonai alechem, alechem lehoveichem, v'yeruchim atem Adonai, osei shamayim v'haaretz, hashamayim, shamayim Adonai, v'haaretz natali b'hadam, lo hamditim hallelujah, then lo kol your day to ma, v'hanachnu nivarech ya, v'yata v'hodolam, v'yata v'hodolam, hallelujah, Mashiv Adonai kol taglo yalai, cross Yeshua. Lichais boxavach todav, Shem Adonai ekra, nidorai Adonai shalem nikdada lechol amo, v'chatzrat v'et Adonai, v'tochechi Yerushalayim, hallelujah. We're at the top of 319 in Lev Shalem. Hallelujah, et Adonai, kol lekol goyim, shavechuhu, shavechuhu, kol ha'olim, ki gavar aleinu, chaystu, v'imeit Adonai, le'olam, hallelujah. Oh, to Adonai, ki tov, ki le'olam chastov. To Adonai, ki tov, ki le'olam chastov. Yom harna, yom harna, yom harna Yisrael, ki le'olam chastov. To Adonai, ki tov, ki le'olam chastov. Yomeruna, yomeruna, yomeruna veit Aharon, ki le'olam chastov. To Adonai, ki tov, ki le'olam chastov. Yomeruna, yomeruna, yomeruna yirei Adonai, ki le'olam chastov. Min hamitzar karatia, Yidchuli sharit tzedek avovam odeya Zeshar ladonai tzadikim yavavu ba Odecha ki anitani v'tehili lishua Odecha ki anitani v'tehili lishua Abonim, Hayta Rosh Even Matsu Abonim, Hayta Rosh the Adonai, Hayta Zot, He Niflat, Beiteinu, Me'et Adonai, Hayta Zot, He Niflat, Beiteinu, Zei Hayom Hasa Adonai, Nagila V'nis V'chavo, Zei Hayom Hasa Adonai, Nagila V'nis V'chavo, Adonai Hoshihana, Adonai Hoshihana, Adonai Hatzlichana, Adonai Hatzlichana. Baruch haba b'shem Adonai, Baruch hu b'beit Adonai, Baruch haba b'shem Adonai. Odu l'Adonai ki tov ki le'olam chesed. Odu l'Adonai ki tov ki le'olam chesed. Yeleluch Adonai Eloheinu kol ma'aseh chesed. Ki lecha tov leodot u'shimcha na'eh lezamer Ki me'olam ve'ad olam ta'el Baruch atah Adonai melech le'olam v'tishvachot Yainanai yananai yanai yanai Davi Kadash Rabbi Amad Yirach Yirtevim Lich Malchut Tebechaychon V'Mechon V'Yiduch Beit Yisrael B'Galavis Monkari V'Meru Ale Yesh Mirabba Mevarach Le'Olam Olam Le'Olayah Yivarach V'Yishabach V'Yibar V'Yitram V'Naseh V'Tadar V'Talev V'Talash V'Nekutsha V'Richu Le'La Min Kol Birchata V'Shirata Shishbchata V'Nekmata D'Miram Me'Alma V'Meru Ale Tit Kabatzo Dono Janda Kol Yisrael Kadam V'Honi V'Yishmai V'Meru Ale Yesh Lama Rava V'Yishmaya V'Chayim Alenu V'Koyisra V'Meru Ale Aseh Shalom V'Ramavu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu Ve'Al Koyisra V'Meru Amen.
We're going to call up Sebastian to lead the Torah service with Cantor Chorny, which is on page 168.
Ein kamocha
Avtecha bechol dor v'dor. Adonai melech, Adonai malach, Adonai imloch, leolam levayin, Adonai oz le'amo yitein, Adonai yavarech et amo v'shalom. Avarachani etiv avirtzonecha et Zion tivnei chamot Yerushalayim tivnei chamot Yerushalayim ki lecha levad batachnu melech Elron ben Yisrael Adonai.
Bless Dina and Michael and Roman to come and open the ark for us. We're still on page 168 at the bottom.
Ibn Soharan Vayomer Moshe.
Kuma Adonai ve'afusu oivecha ve'anusu mesanecha mifanecha
Ki mitzion tetzei Torah. Ki mitzion tetzei Torah. Udivar Adonai miYerushalayim. Baruch shenatan Torah, Torah. Baruch shenatan Torah, Torah. Le'amo Yisrael b'kedushato. Barich Shemei Demarei Alema. Be'ana rachet Velish me kadisha Kadisha yakira Ana emar Kidush lechan Be'ana rachet
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Welcome. If this is your first time to Temple Beth Em, welcome. And even if it's not your first time to Temple Beth Em, welcome. I'm Rabbi Schatz. I'm the associate rabbi here. This is Cantor Chorney. She is the cantor here. And we have a very full Torah service this morning. We have an ufruf. We have a moment to say goodbye to a beloved member. And we also have a moment to say hello and welcome back to two beloved members. So we are going to take our time with this Torah service. We are going to be reading from Parashat Re'eh, which can be found on page 1076 in the Eitz Chaim Chumash, the bigger of the two red books in front of you, or underneath your pew. And if you are at home, it's Deuteronomy 15, verse 1. Ve'yazor v'gem v'shir l'chol ha'chosim bo v'namar amen ha'kol v'dohenu tu kavod la'Torah ya'amdu devor nechama bar harav Chaim v'tema v'Chaim Yosef ben Shmuel v'Freidel Leli Arishon Baruch Natan Torah l'mo Yisrael v'kedushato v'atman v'giman lechem ha'kochem hayom. That's wrong. Yeah, he's just the wrong parsha. Baruch Adonai habarach. Baruch Adonai habarach le'olam va'ed. Baruch Adonai habarach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'torah. Amen.
Amen. מקצב השנים תעשה שמיטה, וזה דבר השמיטה שמור. כל בעל מה שידו אשר ישב רעהו לא ייגש את רעהו ואת אחיו, כי קרא שמיטה על אדוני. את הנוכרי תיגש ואשר יהיה לך, את אחיך תשמיט ידיך. אפס כי לא יהיה בך אביון, כי יברך אדוני, בארץ אשר אדוני אלוהיך נותן לך נחלה לרשתה. רק אם תשמע בקול אדוני אלוהיך, לשמור לעשות את כל המצווה הזאת אשר אנוכי מצווך היום. כי אדוני אלוהיך ברכך כאשר דיבר לך, ועבדת גויים רבים, ואתה לא תעבוד ומשלת בגויים רבים, ובך לא ימשלו.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Amen. Is your brother coming up for Aliyah? Yes. Okay, great. Ya'amod harav melech ben Reb Chaim v'tema l'Aliyah sheni.
Page 1077, verse 7, last line.
Baruch Adonai Baruch le'olam va'ed. Amen.
Amen. כי יהיה לך אביון מאחד אחיך ואחד שעריך וירצך, אשר אדוני אלוהיך נותן לך לו. תאמץ לבבך ולא תקפוץ את ידך מאחיך אביון. כי פתוח תפתח את ידך לו, ובית אביתנו דמסורו אשר יחסור לו. ישמר לך בין ידיו לבבך וליה לאמור, קרבה שנת השבע, שנת השמיטה, ורעינך, ואחיך אביון, ולא תיתן לו, וקרא לך לאדוני ואביך חטא, נתן תיתן לו, ולא ירא לבבך ותדחה לו, כי בגלל הדבר הזה, יברכך אדוני לך בכל מעשיך וכל משלח ידיך, כי לא יחדל אביון מקרב הארץ, על כן אנוכי מצווך לאמור פתוח, תפתח את ידך לאחיך, לענייך ולאביונך בארצך.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר נתן לתורת מפעיל תקיים נותן התורה.
אמן. יעמוד יונתן דניאל בן חיים יוסף ודבורה נחמה לעלייה השלישית.
Page 1079, verse 12.
Baruch et Adonai haborach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai haborach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher b'chabanu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
אמן, כי מאחל לך אחיך העברי, או העברי עבדך 6 שנים, בשנה השביעית תשלחנו חופשי מעמך. וכי תשלחנו חופשי מעמך, לא תשלחנו ריקם. הענק תעניק לו מצאנך מגורנך ומקווך, אשר ברכך אדוני אלוהיך תיתן לו, וזכרת כי עבד היית בארץ מצרים, ויבטחך אדוני אלוהיך, על כן אנוכי מצווך את הדבר הזה היום. והיה כי יאמר אליך לא אצא מעמך, כי אהבך ואת ביתך, כי טוב לו עמך. ולקחת את המרצע, ונתת באוזנו ובדלת, ועליך עבד עולם, ואף למדך תעשה כן. לא יקשה בעיניך, ושלחך אותו חופשי מעמך, כי משנה שכר שכיר עברך 6 שנים, וברכך אדוני אלוהיך, ובכל אשר תעשה.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu torat emet, v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Yasher koach, and a mazal tov to you as well. Though we're going to focus on your sister today, we can also say mazal tov. Ita amad chaya bat Chana Rachel ita glika. Henny, come on up. Lalia Ravi'it. We're on page 1080, verse 19. You're so welcome. You want that sheet so you can do it together? There you go. Baruch Adonai
hamvorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher בחר בנו מכל העמים ונתן לנו את תורתו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
אמן. כל הבכור אשר ייוולד בברכך וצאנך זכר, תתיש לאדוני אלוהיך, לא תעבוד בבכור שורך ולא תגוז בכל צאנך. לפני אדוני אלוהיך תאכלנו שנה בשנה, במקום אשר יבחר אדוני אתה וביתך, וכי יהיה בו מום, ויסח עיוור כל מום רע. לא תזבחנו על אדוני אלוהיך, בשעריך תאכלנו, אתה מביא את האור יחדיו כצבי וחייו, רק את עמלות תאכל הארץ תשבחנו כמים.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת, חיי עולם נטע בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
So before we move on to the next Aliyah, I know everyone's excited about the candy. Hold on to the candy. Don't throw the candy at Henny. Henny, I'm so glad you're up at the Bima today. There are a lot of ways to show up meaningfully in community. You can teach classes, you can have buildings named in your honor, you can lead programming, right? There's any number of ways. And all of them are important. And there are also ways that are less visible outwardly, in the more intimate ritual moments like minyan at our synagogue or thoughtful giving. And Henny, you embody what it is to be a not necessarily ostentatiously visible and still essential pillar of our community, in how thoughtfully and mindfully and consistently you have shown up here for the past 20 plus years. It's rude to disclose someone else's age in public, so I'll ask Henny. Henny, how old are you now? Can I ask?
I'm 98, going on 99 in November.
98, going on 99 in November. And this week, sadly for us, Henny's moving. Henny's been around the corner for the past 20 plus years, and Henny's going to be moving to be closer to her kids, right? And so before you go, we wanted to take this moment to recognize and celebrate you.
Oh, thank you.
I'm going to say one more thing, okay? The Parsha starts when God says, behold, right, re'eh, see, I set before you blessing and curse. And Henny, you have seen a life that has certainly known its share of many, many blessings, and also its share of challenges. And your response has always been to choose the blessing, to see what is around you and to say, I'm going to choose to observe the mitzvot and to be in community and to connect with the ways in which I can be a blessing in the world. And by choosing that blessing, you have in turn been a blessing to us.
Thank you so much. Thank you, one and all.
Last sentence. You're so excited. I don't want to interrupt you, but
You want me to talk?
Can I say one more sentence and then you can say a sentence? You don't have to.
I shall miss you all very much, but I'm moving into an assisted living facility in Mission Viejo, which has its own synagogue and a woman rabbi. So I'm very happy. It's kosher, of course. So it's a change, and I shall miss you so much, all of you.
Thank you, Henny. And we bless you as you make this transition with continued health and a smooth transition. And Rabbi Schatz said going into the Torah service that we're saying goodbye, but we don't say goodbye. We say lehitraot, and we'll miss you, and we'll see you soon.
And I hope to stay in touch with those of you who are my personal friends.
Amen. Amen. Toda, Henny.
We'll pause now for our Misha Berach. So if anybody has someone they are thinking of who is in need of healing, whether physical, mental, emotional, or otherwise, please rise. And in the middle of the blessing, I'll ask that you recite the person's name aloud, and then I will continue with the blessing. Misha Berach, Avoteinu Avraham, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov, Imotenu Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, v'Leah, Yivarech, v'Yirpeh, et Zehava Yafa, bat Esther, v'et Rivka, bat Pesha, v'et Yosef, Menachem, Mendel, ben Gittel, v'et Yehuda, ben Avraham, v'et Sarah, v'et Ben Sion, ben Gittel, v'et Yelena Kramer, v'et Cyril Chana, bat Sivia, v'et Risa Chana, bat Chasya Geula, v'et Yehuda Israel, ben Leah, v'et Mordechai, ben Esther, v'et Yehudit, bat Rivka, v'et Danny, Benjamin, ben Tova, Nurid, v'et Taibel, bat Rachel, Leah, v'et Yoshua, ben Shandel, v'et Batya Leah bat Chaya, v'et Kira Rachel bat Shulami Pesav Yitzchak Elimelech, v'et Yosef Simcha ben Sarah Chana, v'et David Yosef ben Rivka, v'et Zipporah Liba bat Esther Chana, v'et Taiba bat Chaya, v'et Chana Zahava bat Sarah Freda, v'et Aden Ezra Chaim ben Devorah, v'et Tova bat Leah, v'et Shimon ben Chaya, v'et Meir ben Miriam, v'et Dalia bat Leah, v'et Rezo bat Yisrael, v'et Liron bat Ilan v'Chedva, v'et Anel Morales, v'et Jerry Berger, v'et Yaakov ben Ezad, v'et Avraham Yaakov ben Rivka, v'et Daniel ben Shira, ben Yitzchak Dov, ben Yosef, ben Devorah. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yimale Rachamim Aleihem Le'achazikam Le'rafotam Ve'yishlach Lahem Mehera Refuah Shlema Min HaShamayim Refuat HaNefesh Refuat HaGuf Betoch Shar HaCholim V'chazek Yedidei Oskim B'tzorcheihem Shabbat Milizok U'Refuah Krova Lavo Hashtabag Alav Zman Kariv V'Namar Amen. Refuah Shlema, a speedy recovery to all those in need. We're in the fifth Aliyah. Ta'amdu Ya'el Libi Bat Chaim Yosef Udevora Nechama Vet Miriam Sarah Bat Chaim Yosef Udevora Nechama Laliyah Chamishit.
That'll be page 1081, beginning of chapter 16.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed. Amen.
Amen. Shamor et Chodesh Aviv Asita Pesach Adonai Elohecha Ki beChodesh Aviv Hotziach Adonai Elohecha ממצרים לילה, וזבחת פסח לאדוני צאן ובקר, במקום אשר יבחר אדוני לשכן שמו שם, לא תאכל עליו חמץ 7 ימים, תאכל עליו מצות לחם עוני, כי בחיפזון יצאת מארץ מצרים למען תזכור את יום צאתך מארץ מצרים כל ימי חייך. ולא יראה לך שאור וכל גבולך 7 ימים, ולא ילין מן הבשר, אשר תזבח בערב ביום הראשון לבוקר, לא תוכל לזבח את הפסח, באחד שעריך אשר אדוני אלוהיך נותן לך, כי אם למקום אשר יבחר אדוני אלוהיך לשכן שמו, שם תזבח את הפסח בערב, כבוא השמש מועד צאתך ממצרים, ובישלת ויאכלת במקום אשר יבחר אדוני אלוהיך בו, ופנית בבוקר והלכת לאוהליך 6 ימים תאכל מצות, וביום השביעי עצרת אדוני אלוהיך לא תעשה מלאכה.
Page 1083, verse 9.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
אשר בחר בנו מכל העמים ונתן לנו את תורתו, ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Amen.
אמן. 7 שבועות תספור לך, מאחר 5 בגמא, תחל לספור 7 שבועות. ועשית חג שבועות לאדוני אלוהיך, מסעד נדבת ידך אשר תיתן, כאשר יברכך אדוני אלוהיך. ושמחת לבני אדוני אלוהיך, אתה ובנך וביתך, ועבדך ואמתך, ולוי אשר בשעריך, והגר והיתום והאלמנה אשר בקרבך במקום, אשר יבחר אדוני אלוהיך לשכן שמו שם, וזכרת את גבד היית במצרים, ושמרת ועשית את החוקים האלה.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו, ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Amen. So I'll ask the two of you to stay up here for just a second. And I'll ask the parents to come up, and we're going to create a little chuppah around this couple, this chatan and kala, this bride and this groom. It's always hard when the groom is quite tall. Get a real real arm workout, worm arc out. Okay. you can sit. I'm just kidding. So today is Rosh Chodesh Elul, and one of the most famous drashot on the month of Elul is that it is beginning this month in preparation for the high holidays. It's okay, if it's more comfortable, you can stand outside of it. You'll have another chuppah in just a few weeks. That we look at the letters and we see it as an acronym for Ani ledodi vedodi li. I am my beloved's and my beloved is mine. And there's a beautiful drash in there that we are looking to see in one another, in partnership or in relationship with God, our beloved, and that in turn, our partner or God sees us as their beloved, that it's a mirror effect. When I'm preparing a couple for their chuppah, which usually fits them, they often ask about the moment that the bride is veiled, the moment that the groom comes over and puts the veil over the bride, and they ask, why do we have to do that? And so at the wedding, one of the pieces of Torah that I share in that moment is that there are two reasons for which we would veil a bride. One is the traditional reason that rabbis of old and some rabbis of today believe that it is most modest for the woman to have her face covered while she is under the chuppah in order for the moment to be one of modesty and sanctity. I'm not such a fan of that reason. But the other reason is because when Isaac meets Rebekah in the Torah, Rebekah veils herself. And why does she veil herself? Some people say it's for the reason that I just shared, that in traditional views, she should be modest in her appearance in front of him. But why do I think that she veils herself? Because in a moment of finding your partner, in a moment of finding someone who you are going to share all of yourself with, you also need to remember who you are. You need to remember in those moments that you fell in love with one another because the other person sees all of who you are and you see all of who they are. So when we veil ourselves underneath the chuppah, or in preparation for being underneath the chuppah, it's so that we each can remember that though we're doing something that is the most grand gesture of coming together in partnership, of having a wedding, that we still are who we are under that chuppah as individual human beings. Ani ledodi vedodi li is that mirror as well. I, me, who I am today, I am for my beloved. And my beloved, who they are today, they are for me. The two of you shared with me that you balance each other out in many, many different ways, that you are in turn that mirror to one another, that in times of chaos, one of you is calm, in times of deep stress and challenge, the other one of you is able to see through it a pure solution. So I hope for the two of you that this month of Elul, this month of seeing that mirror, of being able to see all of the other person, but in partnership, that you're able to recognize, Ani ladodi, I and my beloveds, all that I bring to this relationship, all of who I am, and vedodili, and also my beloved and all that they bring to the relationship is for me. I'm going to give you a bracha, though I can no longer see David, but he's there. I'm going to give you a mishaberach for this moment of your ufruf in anticipation for your wedding, in anticipation of a life of love and happiness and health. Mishaberach Avoteinu Avraham Yitzchak veYaakov Sarah Hu yevarech et hechatan David ben Michael v'Dina ve'et hakala Dina tzipora b'chaim Yosef v'dvora nechama Asher bekarov yikansu lachupa be'avur she'alu lichvot hamakom ve'lichvot HaTorah v'lichvot HaShabbat HaKadosh Baruch Hu yadrichem livnot Beit Yisrael b'hayit bo yishkenu Hava ve'achava Shalom v'reiyut b'hayit bo yegadlu vanim bevriyut uve'osher be'ahavat Torah Uvemasim tovim ve'yishlacha beracha ve'hatzlacha b'chol ma'aseh yedehem v'nomar amen. Yainanai, yainai, 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 od yeshama ve'are Yehuda uvechutzot Yerushalayim Mazel tov. You can throw the candy. Simen tov, mazel tov, mazel tov, simen tov, mazel tov, mazel tov, simen tov. Yehelanu, 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 lechol Yisrael. Yehelanu, yehelanu, lechol Yisrael. Yehelanu, yehelanu, lechol Yisrael. Yehelanu, yehelanu, lechol Yisrael. Mazal tov, and may this be a wonderful preparation for your chuppah and for a life together of happiness and much love and much health.
I see some smaller humans, like maybe there may be kids kind of in the corners of the room who could maybe help us out, because now there's candy all over the floor. So if you're a kid or somebody who enjoys candy in general, please come forward and help us grab some candy. Oh, the best flavor, yeah. Very good, very good. I could have made that fun. That's good. Yeah, they'll stay up. Ya'amdu. Fran, see the mic? Fadal Chana bet Nachum Leib HaKohen bet Mordechai Leib ben Shmuel HaKohen Leliyah Shvi'i.
page 1084, verse 13.
Adonai Hamvarah.
Baruch Adonai Barak Le'olam Vayed.
Adonai Hamvarach Le'olam Vayed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
חג הסוכות תעשה לך 7 ימים ביוספך מגורנך מקווהך ושמחת בחגיך אתה ובנך ואיתך ועבדך ומטך והלוי והגר והיתום והאלמנה אשר בשעריך 7 ימים תאכל ענניך במקום אשר יבחר אדוני יברכך אדוני אלוהיך בכל תורתך בכל מעשה ידיך והיית שמח 3 ימים בשנה יראך זכורך בני אדוני אלוהיך במקום אשר יבחר בחג המצות ובחג השבועות ובחג הסוכות ולא יראה בני אדוני ריקם איש כבנת ידו כברכת אדוניך אשר נתן לך.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nata b'tocheinu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. And we just want to say, Bruchim Havayim, welcome back. And I hear a happy anniversary next week. So Mazal Tov to you as well. We are going to now bring the Maftir Torah forward. And then we are going to lift and wrap this Sefer Torah. Was someone asked to lift and wrap? Okay, yeah. While we do Chatzi Kaddish, you want to ask someone to lift and wrap? Joe, you want to do Chatzi Kaddish?
Okay. Ikadal v'ikadash shemeh rabba v'lemadi v'rakirteh v'yamlich malchuteh b'chayechan v'yomechan v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael ba'agala u'bizman kari v'imru amen Yehei shemeh rabba mevarach v'alam l'olam elemayit barach v'ishtabach v'par v'terman v'naseh v'tadar v'taleh v'talal shemecht kudsha berichu leila min kol brichata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata damiran b'alema v'imru amen
Ya'amod ha'magbiyah Ya'amod ha'golel Hashiveinu Hashem Hashem Elecha V'nashuva Chodesh Yameinu Kekedem. As the Torah is placed in its place, you may be seated. What are we doing? Maftir. The Maftir for this morning is special for Rosh Chodesh. So it can be found, we're going back in your Chumash to Parshat Pinchas, and it is on page 930. If you are at home, it is Numbers 28. We are beginning on verse 9. Ya'amod Meir ben Eliezer levechana l'aliyah maftir. Baruch Adonai Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Amen. Vayom Shabbat shnei pasim v'nei shana tevimim u'shnei esronim. Solet mincha v'lulav Hashem v'nisko. Olat Shabbat v'Shabbato olat tamid v'niska. U'vrashech adshechem takrivo lal Adonai. Parim v'nei vachar shnayim v'al echad kvasim v'nei shana. Shiva tevimim u'shlosha esronim. Solet mincha v'lulav Hashem el ha'pareh echad u'shnei esronim. Solet mincha v'lulav Hashem el ha'el echad. Isaron, Isaron, Solet mincha v'lulav Hashem el ha'keves echad, ola re'eh mincha u'achi shel Adonai, v'nizkehem chatzi ayin yel ha'par, u'shishit ayin ha'ayil, u'revit ayin la'keves yayin, zot alat Khodesh v'chadsho lechadshei hashana, u'sirizim echad lechatat, l'Adonai, al olat hatamid yaseh v'nizkor.
Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'chayei olam nata b'tocheinu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Please rise for the lifting and closing of the Torah. Ya'amod ha'magbia, ya'amod ha'golel. Have you ever lifted this one before? Yes. Okay, great. Just turn it around. There you go. Vezot haTorah asher sam Moshe lifnei bnei Yisrael al pi Adonai v'yad Moshe. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Marshall will be reading the Haftarah for Shabbat and Rosh Khodesh, which can be found on page 1220. And if you would like to follow along with the brachot, they are in your Sidur on page 175.
And if you're at home, look for Isaiah chapter 66, verse 1.
With Rabbi Schatz's encouragement, I'd like to just mention to you something about the reading of the Haftarah itself. If you turn in your Chumash to page 1223, and you take a look at verse 24, right, which says the following. I'm going to read Robert Alter's beautiful translation. And they shall go out and see the corpses of the people who rebelled against me. For their worm shall never die, and their fire shall not go out, and they shall be a horror to all flesh. What a wonderful way to end the Haftarah, right? Isn't that wonderful? Okay. But as a tradition, we always try to end a Haftarah, not with gloating, but with something which is uplifting. And you'll notice at the bottom of the page, there's an unnumbered verse. V'haya midei Khodesh b'chodsho, u'b'dei Shabbat b'Shabbato. Yavo kol basar l'ishtachvot l'fanai amar Adonai. This is really a repetition of verse 23. So when I read the Haftarah today, you'll say, you're not going to accuse me of repeating myself deliberately, right? Because I'm following a tradition here that in effect we end on an upbeat note and not with the worms shall not die nor the fire be quenched. So we're saying the introduction, we'll start with the Haftarah on page 1220. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nviim tovim v'ratzav v'divrehem hane'emarim be'emet Baruch atah Adonai abocher b'torah u'v'Moshe avdo u'v'Yisrael amo u'v'nvieho emet v'tzedek Ko amar Adonai, Hashamayim kis'i, v'ha'aretz hadom raglai, ezevayit asher tivnu li, v'yezeh makom menuchati, v'et kol ele yadi asata, v'yu kol ele ne'um Adonai, v'el zeh abid, el ani unchei ruach, Ichared al tavadi, shochet hashor makeish, zoveach haseh, orif kelev, ma'ale mincha dam chazir, maskir levona, mivarech haven, gam hema, bacharu b'darchehem, uvshikutsehem nafsham chafetza, Gam ani evchar b'ta'alu lehem, umgerotam avi lahem, ya'an karati v'yeino neh, dibarti v'lo shameyu, v'yasu harab yenai, uva asher lo chafatzti bacharu. Shimu devar Adonai achar redim el devaro, amru, Achechem sone'echem minadechem lema'an shemi yichbad Adonai v'nireh v'simchatchem v'hem yevoshu kol sha'on me'ir kol meichal kol Adonai mishalem gemul la'oyevav b'terem tachil yalada B'terem yavo chevela v'himlita zachar mishama kazot mira'a ka'ele hayuchal eretz b'yom echad im yivaled goy pa'am echad ki chala gam yaladat Zion et baneha Ha'ani ashbir v'lo olid yomar Adonai imani hamolid v'yatzarti yomar Elohayich simchu et Yerushalayim v'giluva kol ohaveha sisu ita masos kol hamid abalim aleha lema'an tinaku usfatem Misho tanchumeha leman tamotzu v'anartem miziv kavodaha kicho amar Adonai hineni note eleha kinahar shalom uchnach al shotev kivod goyim vinaktem Al satina se'u v'al birkayim tisha oshu K'ish asher imot nachamenu Kein anochi anachemchem U'v'Yerushalayim tenuchamu Uritem b'sas libechem V'yatzmotechem kadesha tifrachna V'noda'a yad Adonai et avada v'za'am et oyevav. Ki hinei Adonai ba'esh yavo v'chasufa markevotav lahashiv v'chema apo v'ga'arato b'lahave esh. Ki ba'esh Adonai nishpat uv'charbo et kol basar V'rabu chalalei Adonai המקדשים והמטהרים אל הגנות, אחר אחת בתווך, אוכלי בשר החזיר והשקץ והעכבר, יחדיו יסופו נאום אדוני, ואנוכי מעשיהם ומחשבותיהם, בעל לקבץ את כל הגויים והלשונות, ובאו וראו את כבודי, ושמתי בהם עוד, ושילחתי מהם פליטים אל הגויים, תרשיש פול ולוד, מושכי קשת תובל ויוון, האיים הרחוקים, אשר לא שמעו את שמעי ולא ראו את כבודי, והגידו את כבודי בגויים. והביאו את כל אחיכם מכל הגויים מנחה לאדוני בסוסים וברכב ובעצבים ובפרדים ובכיכרות על הר קודשי ירושלים אמר אדוני כאשר יביאו בני ישראל את המנחה בכלי טהור בית אדוני וגם מהם אקח לכהנים ללוויים אמר אדוני כי כאשר השמיים החדשים והארץ החדשה אשר אני עושה עומדים לפני נאום אדוני כן יעמוד זרעכם ושמכם והיה מדי חודש בחודשו ומדי שבת בשבתו יבוא כל בשר להשתחוות לפני אמר אדוני ויצאו וראו בפגרי האנשים הפושעים בי כי תולתם לא תמות ואישם לא תכפה והיו דיראון לכל בשר. And verse 23. והיה מדי חודש בחודשו ומדי שבת בשבתו יבוא כל בשר להשתחוות לפני אמר אדוני. Back in your Siddur, page 328 in Lev Shalem. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, tzur kol haolamim, tzadik b'chol hadorot, ha'el ha'ne'eman, ha'omer ve'oseh, ha'medaber u'mkayem, shekol devarav emet v'tzedek, ne'eman atahu Adonai Eloheinu, ve'ne'emanim devarecha, v'davar echad midvarecha chor lo yashuv rekam, ki el melech ne'eman v'rachaman ata, baruch ata Adonai, oel ha'ne'eman b'chol devarav, rachem al Zion ki beit chayenu, v'la'luvat nefesh toshia b'mehera v'yameinu, Baruch ata Adonai, mesamech Zion b'vaneha, samechenu Adonai Eloheinu, v'Eliyahu hanavi avdecha, u'malchut Beit David meshichecha, b'meira yavo v'yagel libeinu, al kiso lo yeshev zar, v'lo yinchalu od acherim et kevodo, ki v'shem kodshecha nishbata lo, Shloich b'nei ro li'olam va'ed baruch ata Adonai Magen David Al HaTorah v'al ha'avodah v'al ha'nevi'im v'al yom ha'shabbat hazeh she'atata lanu Adonai Eloheinu likdusha limnucha Lichavod ultifaret al hakol Adonai Eloheinu anachnu modim lach umvorachim otach yitbarach shimcha b'fi kol chai tamid le'olam va'ed Baruch ata Adonai mekadesh haShabbat.
There's still a lot of candies up here. We can put away those larger of the two red books if you're holding on to a chumash still, and we return to the Siddur. We're on page 176 if you're in the Lev Shalem.
Or page 148 or page 412.
Marandi Vishwaya Hevesadekon Kozaman Vehitan, Benomara, Mimi Shabehirach, Havoteinu Abraham Yitzchak Yaakov. Hakadosh Baruch Hu Yishalem Secharam, Yisir Mehim Kol Machala, Virpadecho Guham, Yislach Lecho Avonam, Yishlach Viracha, Yahitzlacha. B'chol ma'aseh yideihem im kol Yisrael achehem v'nomar amen. We continue with the prayers for peace, Israel, for our country, Israel, and peace. Beginning on page 177, you're invited to rise. The texts are the ones that we have in Lev Shalem. Again, we're on page 177. Our God and God of our ancestors, with mercy accept our prayer on behalf of our country and its government. Pour out your blessing upon this land, upon its inhabitants, upon its leaders, its judges, officers, and officials, who faithfully devote themselves to the needs of the public. Help them understand the rules of justice you have decreed, so that peace and security, happiness and freedom will never depart from our land. Adonai, God whose spirit is in all creatures, we pray that your spirit be awakened within all the inhabitants of our land. Uproot from our hearts hatred and malice, jealousy and strife. Plant love and companionship, peace and friendship among the many peoples and faiths who dwell in our nation. Grant us the knowledge to judge justly, the wisdom to act with compassion, and the understanding and courage to root out poverty from our land. May it be your will that our land be a blessing to all who dwell on earth.
And may you cause all peoples to dwell in friendship and freedom. Speedily fulfill the vision of your prophets. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. For all of them, from the least to the greatest, shall know me. And let us say, Amen.
Top of the following page in Hebrew, a prayer for the state of Israel.
Avinu Shabbat Shamayim, Sur Yisrael V'Goalo, Barech Eminat Yisrael, Reshit Tzmichat Tfiloteinu. Hagen Aleha Ve'evrat Chastecha, Ufros Aleha Sukat Shlomecha, Ushlach Orcha V'Amitcha L'Rasheha, Sareha V'Yotzeha, V'Taknem Beitzat Tova Milfanecha, Chazek et Yidei Minei Eretz Kodshenu, V'Hanchilem Eloheinu Yeshua, V'Ater et Nitzachon Te'atrem, V'Natata Shalom Ba'aretz, V'Simchat Olam Liyoshveha, V'Nomar Amen.
A prayer for peace responsively. May we see the day when war and bloodshed cease, when a great peace will embrace the whole world.
Then nation will not threaten nation, and humankind will not again know war.
For all who live on earth shall realize we have not come into being to hate or to destroy. We have come into being to praise, to labor, and to love.
Compassionate God, bless the leaders of all nations with the power of compassion.
Fulfill the promise conveyed in Scripture. I will bring peace to the land, and you shall lie down, and no one shall terrify you.
I will rid the land of vicious beasts, and it shall not be ravaged by war.
Let justice and righteousness flow like a mighty stream. Let God's peace fill the earth as the waters fill the sea. And let us say,
Amen.
Amen. You may be seated. We continue now with Ashrei and Lev Shalem. We're on 181.
Oh, sorry.
or 151 or page 420.
Tehillat Adonai Perpi, V'yarech Basar, Shem Koshel Leolam Laed, La'nach Nirivarech Ya, V'yitavi Hadulam, Hallelujah. Please rise. We're on page 183, 153, or 422. Hallelujah, Shem Adonai, Ki Niskal, Shemo Levarto, Adon Eretz, Lishamayim, Vayar Enkem Yamo, Tehillah Lecho, Hasita, Livrei Israel, Am Kerovo, Hallelujah, Hallelujah, Mizmor LeDavid, Hallel Adonai,
You may be seated. Oh, not your microphone. There we go. You know, it's very disappointing. Back in my day, there was no way this much candy would still be on the ground.
I know.
So
That's because back in your day, you would be picking up the candy.
Correct. But not just me. So, Asa, where did Asa go? Okay, come on, get the candy. Get the candy. Go. Kate, come on, help me out here, folks. There you go. Thank you, Asa. See, Asa's got. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Yes, please help. Good. Very good. Can I help? Very good. It takes all kinds to make a community. Very good. Okay. Thank you. See, there we go. Shkoyach. All right, now we can start.
I like that you took a few for yourself.
Yeah, obviously. Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
We are in the sanctuary, and we're not outside, but this is a Beiteinu service. So because it's a Beiteinu service rather than a more frontal drash, we're going to do some teaching, and there was a lot of simchas, so it's already 11:40, so it'll be a quick-ish teaching, but we're still going to do some learning together. I'm going to pass these out in a minute, but first, the audience participation part of our program this morning. Straw poll. We're going to talk about theology this morning, how we think of God, and what our sense of our relationship with God is. One of the ways in our tradition that we talk about God is thinking about God as a parent, traditionally God as a father. Raise your hand if that is a way of thinking about God, if that is a metaphor for God that is somewhat to very meaningful for you. God as a parent, God as a father. Show of hands. Interesting. Raise your hand if that is something that is somewhat to very not meaningful to you, something that doesn't really work for you. Great, thank you. Raise your hand if you're ready for me to stop asking people to raise their hands so we can go to Kodesh. That's what I thought. Okay, so I'll enlist my fellow clergy for what they went to grad school for years for to help hand out source sheets. There's an interesting verse in the Parsha this week at the beginning of chapter 14 that gives us this concept, this idea of God very clearly. And so what we're going to do this morning is we're going to dive into it a little bit, see what we can glean about this concept from these verses, and then try to refract it back inwards to see what that might do for us. As a shameless plug, by the way, while the source sheets are getting passed out, myself and Miriam Hoffman, who's going into her last year of rabbinical school at HUC, we, as part of our Elul series, pulled together by Rabbi Schatz, of course, we are teaching a class called Building a Relationship with God in a couple of weeks, and we're actually going to be running that course about once a month over the course of the year. So if you like this, come check that out too, and if you don't like this, maybe you'll like the class better, so come check it out anyway. There's this beautiful quote that I found as I was looking into these verses right at the top of the page. And it's interesting as Rabbi Schatz was offering her blessings to Rebecca and David, talking about this idea of our relationship with God as the beloved, and it actually transitions nicely from that idea into the idea of God as a parent. This sense from Michael Rushigrad, who's a contemporary philosopher of Judaism, God sees the face of his beloved Abraham in each and every one of his children, as a man sees the face of his beloved in the children of his union with his beloved. Can someone unpack that for me? How would you say that if you weren't a philosopher? Like, what does that actually mean? How would you Englishify that? The quote at the top of the page. Yes? Great. So that's kind of part one of this, right? God sees Abraham, God loves Abraham, and then God forms this partnership with Abraham to create this people. And then what happens? Then through that partnership, what happens? What's the next piece of that? Yeah, Alan.
Through that partnership, new children are created, and just like God sees Abraham as his child, we see our own children as part of that ongoing connection.
Yeah, I would tweak that a little bit, Alan. I would say that just like when I look at my kids, and I see in my kids the face of my wife, of my beloved, when God looks at us, God sees embodied in each of us God's love for Abraham, which has been sustained on through the generations. Beautiful, beautiful image. We could probably spend the next 20-ish minutes just diving into that idea. But I want to bring it into the Parsha a little bit because this idea is presented in the Parsha, but then it's a part of a verse that doesn't necessarily organically seem to make sense, but that if we look at it a little more clearly, maybe can flesh this idea out a little bit more. I will say, for the folks who are we Zooming, are we live streaming? What are we doing today?
I think both.
Both. I apologize. I didn't get the source sheets together in time. I was operating on pre-COVID time when I thought I could wait until the last minute before Shabbat to print out source sheets. They were supposed to get put on the website. Tishrei is coming. I am sorry. Send it to you after Shabbat. So we're gonna pick it up. We didn't read these verses today, but this is where this idea shows up. Someone want to just read out beginning of chapter 14 in Dvarim?
You should read it because they won't be able to hear it.
I should read it because they won't be able to hear it. Thank you, Rabbi Schatz. Banim atem l'Adonai Elokechem. You are children of your God. Lo titgodedu velo tasimu karcha bein einechem lamet. I'll read it as it's translated, although in a bit we'll undo this a little bit. You shall not gash yourselves nor shave the front of your heads because of the dead. Ki am kadosh atah l'Adonai Elohecha, for you are a holy people to the Lord your God. Uvecha bachar Adonai lihyot lo la'am sigulan. God has chosen you to be a treasured people. Mikol ha'amim al pnei hadamah, from all of the people that are on the face of the earth. These are lovely ideas. These are interesting teachings. They don't seem to necessarily organically flow one into the other. You are children of the Lord your God. Great. Don't cut yourselves. Okay. Right? Like, I would like some carrots from the store. Great. Maybe we should have fish tomorrow. Sure. Right? Like, those don't necessarily seem to organically go one into the other. And so, of course, our commentators, our rabbis, dive into this a little bit to try to understand, what does one have to do with the other? Why are we being told you are children of the Lord your God, followed by these particular thoughts, practices, and ideas? Okay? Good so far? The whole chunk of people who are very important back here, who I can't see at all, but I'll try to keep swooping back. Okay. So I've broken it down into kind of three. This is not very much time at all, is it? I've broken it up into three different ideas that we can dive into. Not your fault. You're in charge. Take some ownership, Rabbi. So we'll look at I sort of numbered them out. What does it mean to be a child of God? To be a child of God, it means you have to take care of yourself. That you are a unique and holy being, a unique and holy person in the world, and then because of that, what does that have to do with those next phrases? That you have to take care of yourself. So I keep reading it out so everybody at home can hear it? Okay. So this idea from Shadal, who picks up on Rashi's comment, but it expands it out a little bit. Shadal, Shmuel David Luzzatto, is a 19th century teacher in Italy. He says, because you are children of God, it is fit that you should be pleasant and not caught up and intentionally baldened, which is a verb that doesn't get enough attention from me. Intentionally baldened, that is to say, you are the legion of the king. It is fitting that you should see on each other splendor and majesty, and shaved heads and cut flesh diminish and cheapen the body of a person. Quick pop out, and then back into this. This verse and a similar verse in Leviticus. I'm sorry, I wish I had like sunshades to give out to you. I apologize. We still got to get the Astrodome retractable roof thing going here. This verse and a similar one in Vayikra are the ones most frequently cited for why people who are Jewish should not get tattoos, and that has led to sort of the common understanding and misperception that if you get a tattoo, you cannot be buried in a Jewish cemetery. That is not true. For more information, you can read the tshuva. I just saw it, but do you know who wrote the tshuva on using tattoos? Do you guys know?
Rabbi Elidor.
Rabbi Alan Lucas, whose name might sound familiar, the father of our former associate rabbi, wrote a tshuva for the conservative movement about Jews and tattoos. We can have that conversation later. You can still get buried in a Jewish cemetery even if you have a tattoo. Back into this verse. What do people think of this idea from Shadal? This sense that the connection between you should be children of God means you have an obligation to take care of your body. Resonate? Interesting? Doesn't make any sense? What do people think? Please.
I mean, it's attractive, but I don't think it works with the passage. It's the lamed at the end of that sentence is the establishing factor for that sentence.
Great.
And so this is probably a reference to pagan customs or something like this.
Great. So saying that might work conceptually, but if we're really trying to bring it down into the verse, it seems to be located specifically in relationship to mourning customs, right? That's number 2. We're going to get to that in a second.
Not necessarily mourning, but I imagine there was some religious activity that was pagan,
right,
that involved cutting and so forth, and something to do with honoring or connecting to, to the people who preceded them.
Right. This might be a nice idea, but if we're really going to bring it into the verse, recognize the whole verse in terms of the lamed, the dead person piece. That doesn't seem to fully check out. Yes? No?
I didn't hear you well.
That if we're going to talk about it in terms of does it work fit into the whole verse, you have to acknowledge the totality of the verse talking about its relationship to someone who's dead.
Yes, yes.
Got it. Other thoughts on this?
Deborah, Singer Franks.
Oh, hi Deborah.
Hi. You know, I gotta say, if you're gonna start this off with Abraham, there's one serious cut that we're still supposed to make that's hanging over this whole thing. And also there's a cut that Abraham almost makes that is very important. So I would just suggest that maybe it's make the cuts I tell you to and not the ones I tell you not to.
Interesting. Very interesting. So Deborah, for those who might not have heard on the other side of the room, those who might not have heard home, is referencing that since I walked into it, since I brought Abraham in at the beginning, that there's a certain type of cut that God initially tells Abraham to perform that we continue to hold by, and there was a certain cut that Abraham almost made, Akedat Yitzchak, the near sacrifice of Isaac. So if we're going to talk about when and how we should and shouldn't make incisions onto our flesh, that it's not necessarily a full blanket statement, right? That there are some ways in which there's actually something you're commanded to do, and some ways in which you're commanded not to do it. Which, by the way, true of all kinds of things, right? There are things we should eat and things we shouldn't eat. Ways in which we should have intimate relations, ways that we shouldn't have intimate relationship, right? Ways that we should worship, ways that we shouldn't, right? I think that's true across the board and pretty much all aspect of our lives. But yes, interesting that that's the thing kind of jumping off of the page of you. Yeah, interesting. One more thought on this, and then I want to move us forward, or not? One or not? Yeah, Deb. Okay. Right. Yeah, I think that's true. That I didn't necessarily put that on this page. Like, of course, there's a whole bunch of sources on this. It seems clear that this probably is related to pagan practices around mourning that happened then, And so then this is a way of differentiating ourselves. This specific comment is talking about how not just should you not do what pagan people are doing, but it's also for how you should be taking care of your body, right? But that's part of this as well. I'm going to use that, if it's okay. Thank you, Warren through Deb. Appreciate you both. I'm going to use that as a jumping off point into our next potential candidate for what this means to be a child of God. I'll be very interested. I'm not going to prime the pump anymore in this. I will be interested to see what people think of idea number 2. Leave that there. The meaning of children is, from Ibn Ezra, now that you know you are children of God and that the Lord loves you more than a father loves his son, do not cut yourselves over anything that God does, for whatever God does is for the good. Any responses to that idea? Chaim?
This has got to be the best one. because it's basically, it seems to have very little relationship to what is either implied subjectively by the verse or how other commentators understand it. It's basically saying, just don't get down by God. God's God. You do you. God is going to do God. But don't let it get to you. And cutting yourself is a sign that it gets to you.
Interesting. Does everybody agree with Chaim? Gary agrees with Chaim. I have a... Oh, Ale.
Yes, Rabbi. I believe that in the context of mourning, people feel so much pain over the loss of a loved one that pain is inflicted upon your own body. And I think that basically what it's saying is don't do that to you, what God is doing, that's his will.
Yeah.
Don't take it to the other verse, don't cheapen yourself, don't inflict that pain upon you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's exactly right. It's saying you might be feeling this pain. Hold that pain. Don't do it to yourself. Have some faith and also make sure that you're taking care of you. I will say for myself, I have a very difficult time with this theology. But talking about theology isn't interesting if you only put sources on the page that you agree with. We're blessed to be the tradition that has lots of theological ideas. This is one of them. I have a really hard time with the idea that everything God does is for the good. I have an incredibly difficult time with that. And someone is, oh, yes, please. Hi. Shabbat Shalom. Yeah. You're not even saying God, everything God is for the good. You're saying the totality of the metaphor is really difficult for you. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It is not necessarily a simple metaphor to say God is a parent, right? If folks looked around, I would say, when we did the straw poll at the beginning, I would say about 50% of folks liked it, about 30% of folks not so much, and 20% of people were already napping or let them snooze for a little, right? But it's clearly not a simple thing, and also predicated on, our own understanding of what parenting is and our own relationships with our parent, right? I'm very lucky in terms of the relationships I have with my parents, very positive relationships. I love them very much. Most days they love me too. No, they love me too. Not everybody, I consider myself very blessed in that regard, right? And for some people it's very fraught. For some people it's a complicated metaphor. I'll also say that Traditionally, of course, this is all framed in the masculine in terms of God as father. But if we talk about God as parent, we can also think about God as mother, right? Harachman, right? God is merciful, rechem, womb, right? There's what to say in our tradition about exploring that as well. So I hear you. I hear you. It's not simple. Yes?
You may have misspoke, or I may have misunderstood when you said that you have trouble with the notion that everything that God does is good. I think perhaps, did you mean that everything that happens, that not everything that happens is God's doing? Right? So I don't know what you meant, but I was guessing that you probably meant that all things that happen are not necessarily things that God did.
I think we could very easily spend the next 3 hours getting into this.
Well, I'm just trying to understand what you meant, because
Yeah. I think trying to parse out what God actively does or doesn't do in the world is very difficult to do for me. And looking around at the world and seeing the way the world works and saying, oh, this is all God's doing, and therefore it's all good, I have a very hard time with that. And I also have a very hard time going into an idea that quickly evolves into a more Gnostic idea in terms of God only does the good stuff, and then there's also another force in the world that does other stuff, and saying, oh, God just does the good stuff. Isn't God powerful enough to fight off all this schmutz that's going on, right? So,
I mean, it is a 3-hour discussion.
It is a 3-hour discussion,
Or
right?
or longer.
Well,
For these reasons, I have trouble with this passage,
Yeah.
because it's implicit that
Right. Your sense of how powerful God is and your sense of God's goodness, one or the other of those comes into question very quickly with this idea.
Right, process
Right?
theology.
Which is right, which gets into the idea of process theology that Rabbi Artson, Ziegler, dean of the school there, who is right around the corner, talks about a lot in terms of trying to sort through these ideas, and it's present in a traditional Jewish theology, right? And again, we're blessed to have a tradition that has lots of theological ideas, right? So let's do one more, and then I'll try to bring us in for landing, and then we'll still do Musa, and then go to Kodesh. Okay, this next one is actually what initially caught my eye about this verse, because I had never seen this before, and I thought it was very interesting. We get into some rabbinic wordplay, and what is noon on Shabbat for, if not time for some rabbinic wordplay? It originally is in the Talmud and gets sort of communicated a bit more clearly in this collection of Midrash and Sifrei Dvarim. Lo tit go to do, this phrase that is translated as do not gash yourselves, do not lacerate yourselves, do not form opposing factions, but all of you consolidate into one bond, as in he founded his bond, his agudah, upon the earth. So what it's doing is, this interpretation is looking at the verb tit go to do, and saying, oh, this isn't actually about gashing, this is related to the word agudah, that there is a collective, a single unit, right? One cohesive whole, and to teach go dead is to create factions, is to divide up into different groups. And so what's being communicated here is that you shouldn't do that. That we are all children of God. And so because of that, we have an obligation to make sure that we maintain unity within ourselves. I will say right now, that is clearly not the pshat. That is clearly not the simple, straightforward meaning of the verse. And I think it's a really interesting one. I think it's a really interesting idea, and it's actually picked up as a source in the Talmud and further on for how you shouldn't have multiple courts in the same city. You should only have one court in each city when it comes to legal matters, because there shouldn't be factions, because there shouldn't be a system that sustains the possibility for divisions. I'll also say, Tishrei is coming. Tishrei is coming. Happy Elul, everybody. Almost. Rosh Kodesh, but Elul, you know. My favorite line in all the High Holiday liturgy is that how we should make ourselves ke'agudah achat la'asot retzonecha b'levav shalom, that we should make ourselves collectively as one unit to do God's will with a whole heart. whenever I see that word, I think, yay, Rosh Hashanah, hooray. Thoughts on this understanding of the verse? Cantor Chorney.
So some of the people who are in this room studied this commentary a few weeks ago on a Shabbat afternoon on Korach, on Lo Tigodadu, and this splitting apart. And actually, on the Talmud, I cannot remember which of the Mikro Gedolot off the top of my head had the comment, but it was on Shabbat Mincha that this is the source of Atah Echad V'Shimcha Echad. So this is the idea of the oneness, not only on the High Holy Days, but also like not just Aguda Echad, but the idea that every week we're saying that. But the reason why I like this in the context of your source sheet is that I think Lo Titgodadu is something we often have to encourage people to think about at a time of death. Because the splitting into factions that happens at a time of death, often amidst families, is unfortunately maybe closer to the Peshat than we like to think about. So that's new for me. And I don't know that that's so distant from the Peshat. The idea of instructing the Israelites to think about not gashing apart their family at that time seems pretty on point. And I like that in this context a lot.
Nice. I really like how you read that back in. I like that a lot. I'll also say that part of what spoke to me about this reading is bringing it back actually into the first source I brought, this idea of taking care of ourselves. It's also possible not only to have divisions amongst other people, it's also possible to have divisions within ourselves, right? That we can have splits within our personality, we can have the parts of ourselves that we like, the parts of ourselves that we don't like, the parts of ourselves that we say, I want to bring this into the world, the parts of ourselves that we say, I don't want to deal with that. And in terms of trying to not just bring wholeness in general, not just bring wholeness in families, but also working on bringing wholeness to ourselves. That's obviously a drosh on a drosh, but I think there's something there as well. Other thoughts on this midrash from Sifrei Dvarim? We'll wrap up in a minute. People like this Lo Titgodadu? What do people think of this one? People want Sean. Okay, so I'll wrap this up by nodding to what I put here at the bottom, and then one more thought, and we'll go into Musaf. It's interesting to me as well that this first verse, which we probably could have just done the whole thing on, then goes into this second verse that talks about this idea of chosenness, that is its own complicated 3-hour at least conversation for where and how we see that today. And this idea of being loved by God and being cared for as a parent loves a child, and yet at the same time being said, oh, but you're special and you're not like anybody else, that seems potentially challenging to reconcile. And these two sources that I put here at the bottom, one from Lord Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, one from Rabbi Kalanimus Kalman Shapira, who also known as the Kodesh, a rabbi from the early in the 20th century, I think bring interesting thoughts to refract this idea through. I'll just pull out one line from each. Biblical monotheism from Rabbi Sachs is not the idea that there is one God and therefore one gateway to God's presence. On the contrary, it is the idea that the unity of God is to be found in the diversity of creation. I think is a really interesting idea then fed back into this idea of Lo Titgodadu, right? On the one hand, we're being told, don't have divisions, make sure there's unity. And then here Rabbi Sachs is saying, actually, make sure you recognize that there is diversity and that there is holiness in that diversity. I think that tension can stand on its own, but it's an interesting one. And as we move, I can't believe I'm saying this, as we move into the high holiday season, how are we already here? I thought we had more time. As we move into this high holiday season, this idea of God as Father, we're going to be hearing it a lot, folks. Just get used to it. Avinu Malkeinu, get used to it. It's coming. Lots of Avinu Malkeinu coming soon to a synagogue near you. What I would offer is each of these concepts potentially offers a way to rethink and re-envision and revivify by your sense of what that metaphor can be, whether that metaphor works for you, whether that theological understanding doesn't work for you. I think just like any relationship, building a relationship with God takes work and evolves over time and shifts and grows, right? My relationship with my parents is not the relationship it was when I was a kid or an adolescent or a younger adult. My relationship with my wife, my relationship with my friends, my relationship with my kids, so on and so forth. And so in offering these sources, I hope that this can bring kind of a new way of thinking about that metaphor, that way of understanding a relationship with God and what that can be. And I'll just close by sharing this source. I love this last rabbi on the page. He's really, his works are some of the most precious to me in terms of Hasidic writings. So I will close with his words and let them stand on their own. Like the son who rejoices to greet his father after not seeing him for several years, so too in our service we wish to feel our soul speeding towards its father for whom it longs, running and dissolving the dissolution of the soul as it spills into the embrace of its Father in heaven. May we all be so blessed to feel embraced and loved and seen in the ideal form, as challenging as it might be in its metaphor, the ideal form of a parent loving a child, that we can be held in that way. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Yesher Koach to Rabbi Shapiro. We are going to continue with Chatzi Kaddish on page 184, and then we are going to turn to the Rosh Chodesh Amidah for Shabbat, which is on page 193, or for those at home, page 166 or page 486. And similar to during Shacharit, Cantor Chorney will begin the Amidah aloud for us. We'll join together for the Kedusha, and then we will go back and do our own whispered Amidah ourselves, again on page 193.
Shabbat v'bar v'shemam v'tnasi v'tadar v'talei v'talal l'shemida kudesha v'yarichu le'ila min kol berchata v'shirata shish berchata v'nechmata damira me'ama v'yimeru amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elokei Avoteinu Elokei Abraham Elokei Yitzchak v'Elokei Yaakov Elokei Sarah Elokei Rivka Elokei Rachel v'Elokei Leah Hayla gadol gibor banora elyon umel chasadim tovim v'konei hakol v'zocher chastei avot u'mevigo eliv devnei hanman shemo b'hava melech ozer u'volkei Moshiach u'magen baruch atah Adonai magen Avraham u'volkei tzara atah gibor le'olam Adonai mechayim itim atah rav le'Hoshia Mechalkel chayim v'chesed
Mechayim eitim v'rachamim rabim
Tzomech nufilim v'rofei cholim U'matir asurim U'mekayim emunato Lishenei afar V'chamocha bal keburot Yeshua v'ne'eman atah l'chayot mitim Baruch atah Adonai l'chayei hamitim Naritzucha v'nakdishecha k'sotziach sarfei kodesh hamekdishim shimcha b'kodesh Kakatuv liyad v'yecha v'karazeh zev yamar
Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzvahot melech
Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzvahot melech haaretz kivodo Kivodo malei hodam Misharetav Sholim zelazeh Hayim ekom Kivodo Le'um Shalom, Hamyachadim Shemo, Erev Avoker, B'chol Yom Tamid, Hamayim B'Ahava, Shema, Omerim, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hu Eloheinu, Hu Avinu, Hu Malkeinu, Hu Moshiachenu, V'Hu Yashmi'enu, V'Racham Havshenit, Leinei Kol Chai, Liyat Lachem, Le'Elohim, Ani Adonai, Elohechem, U'divrei Kodesh Katuv Lemo. Imloch Adonai Le'olam, Elohech Zihon Lidor Vador, Hallelujah. Lidor Vador Nakit Gon Lecha, Unetzach Netzachim, Kedushatcha Nakdish, V'Shivcha Eloheinu V'Dinu Lo Yamush, Le'olam Va'ed, Ki El Melech Gadol, V'Kadosh Ata, Baruch Ata Adonai, Ha'el HaKadosh. Haven't yet completed your private Amidah, please continue at your own pace. We're on 203 or 181 or 506. Each gadal v'kadash mei rabba v'yamad divra kirtei v'mlich v'chotei b'chaychon v'mechon v'chaydu chol Beit Yisrael v'galah v'zman gari v'meru amen yeshri rabba mevarach le'olam u'lam le'omaya Yibarach v'yishabach v'yiparvich mamina sevita dar v'ita levita l'shmei kucha beri chulela Minko birchata v'shivrata tushbachata v'nekmata d'miram v'yama v'meru amin Tikabat salata hunu v'janta chol Yisrael kadam v'onivish v'meru amin Yishlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim alinu v'chol Yisrael v'meru amin Oseh shalom imromav v'yaseh shalom aleinu v'el kol Yisrael v'meru Amen. You can be seated. Enke Eloheinu, enke Adonenu, enke Malkeinu, enke Moshienu, micha Eloheinu, micha Adonenu, micha Malkeinu, micha Moshienu, Dodel Eloheinu, Dodel Adonenu, Dodel Malkeinu, Dodel Moshienu, Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Adonenu, Baruch Malkeinu, Baruch Moshienu, Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adonenu, Atahu Malkeinu, Atahu Moshienu, Atahu Shektiru, Avoteinu, Lefanecha, Et Kitoret Hasamim. We rise for Aleinu. We're on 205, 183, or 510. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol l'teitz gidula liotze bereshit shelo asanu kegli haratzot v'lo samanu k'mishpechot ha'adama shelo sam chelkeinu kaem v'gomer aleinu kechol hamonom v'anachnu koreim u'mishachavim u'modim lifnei melech malchim melachim hakadosh baruch hu. Nakatu b'toratecha Adonai himloch le'olam va'ed v'ne'emar v'haya Adonai le'melech al kol haaretz v'yom hahu yeh Adonai echad u'shemo echad. Mourner's Kodesh is on page 207, 184, or 512. Yit gadal v'yit kadash shemei rabba v'alma divra kirutei v'amlich malchutei v'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael ba'agala u'vizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shemei rabba mevarach le'olam u'amei omaya yit barach v'yishtabach v'yitpar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitale v'yithalal shemeh dekudsha berichu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata damiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen.
Amen. Yasher koach to Cantor Chorney and to Sebastian for leading us in davening this morning, and to Mark for reading Torah, and to Marshall for reading Haftarah. I'm going to make these announcements very quick because we have kept you in here for many simchas for a little too long. But what else you got to do today, right? So very quickly, this week begins, well, today, but this week begins our Elul series. Tomorrow I'm teaching the first class at 5 p.m. There are offerings in the morning, at noon, and at night. There are also offerings on Zoom or in person. There are also some offerings that are hybrid. So if you are interested in learning with Temple Beth Am during Elul, there is something for you to learn. This week, I am teaching, Rabbi Dorf is teaching, Rabbi Rembam, who was in here, is teaching, Cantor Chorney is teaching, Annie Spar is teaching, maybe there was someone else. Next Sunday, Rabbi Deborah Silver is teaching. So there are teachers from all over. There are times that should work for you. I hope you will join us. It is the time that we should be really diving into our own minds and souls and hearts. And if not now, when, right? So do it before the high holiday season begins. Tonight at 6:35, I will be leading Mincha and Mariv and teaching a little bit. I will be teaching a class called Law and Order. So if you like the show, it's not about that, but it's a catchy title. We are going to rise Mazal Tov again to Rebecca and, oh, they're right there. Rebecca and to David. Please rise on page 77 for Kiddush. And for Motzi, Kiddush, that's what I was going to say. Kiddush is right behind us in the ballroom as soon as we are done in here.
And if you are family with slightly younger kids, you might want to join us on the field today. 2 to 4 p.m. is our first Shabbat hangout back on the field. No agenda, just hanging out. It's named properly. Shabbat hangout 2 to 4 today. Kiddush.
ושמרו בני ישראל לשבע לזאת את השבע לדור תמברית עולם ביני ובין בני ישראל תהיללם כי שת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ וביום השביעי שבת וינפש זכור את יום השבת לקדשו 6 ימים תבוא ועשית כל מלאכתך ויום השביעי שבת לאדוני אלוהיך לא תעשה כל מלאכה אתה ובנך וביתך עבדך ואמתך ובהמתך וגרך אשר בשעריך כי 6 ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ את הים וכל אשר בם וינח ביום השביעי על כן ברך אדוני את יום השבת ויקדשהו סברים ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם בורא פרי הגפן אמן. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam u'matzi lechem min haaretz. Shabbat Shalom.